Every criticism, judgment, diagnosis, and outburst of anger is a tragic expression of an unmet need. Now that is a Marshall Rosenberg special, and today we're going to be talking about NVC, which is called nonviolent communication. And we're going to focus on unmet needs. So as men, I think you guys can relate with me on this one. Societally, we are taught some pretty important lessons early on. Now, sadness and vulnerability, those usually lead to rejection and ridicule. Weakness is not rewarded. And usually as men, we're loved not so much for just being men, but more of what we provide. Now, things to think about that we don't really catch on to. As little girls, girls are loved for being little girls. And as women, we love women just for being the women that they are. And as little boys, we're loved for being little boys. There's something that we don't really notice or are taught when we transition from teenage boy to man, is something changes for us where we're not just loved for being boys anymore. Now we're loved for what our potential is, what we provide, and what kind of things we can bring to the table to deserve love. Now nod your head if you can relate with me on this one. Have you ever opened up to a young girl when you were younger, tell her that you like her, or open up your feelings, or even have a vulnerable moment in front of her, just to find yourself getting massively rejected, or being made fun of, or getting shut down completely? Now, we learn early on that unless we're showing strength, or we're showing strong potential, or we have our stoic demeanor already as our transition from boy to man is never taught to us, we learn very quickly that being weak or soft or very vulnerable in these situations is often not rewarded with sex or love or kindness. We get rejected, and it hurts. But you can't show it hurts. Be a man, cowboy up, don't be a bitch. Now, these are all things that we have all heard, or we know of these things being said, and it affects the way that we treat ourselves, it affects the way we express ourselves, and it makes it so it's very difficult for us to be able to connect, especially when women are like, I would love a sensitive man. Bitch, I tried that. No, you don't. Now, we learned that there's not a lot of emotions that we're allowed to show that get us the reaction or responses that we want to have. If we're way over the top excited and we make it so that we're way too much as far as our happiness or excitement, or way too into some girl, boy, do they get freaked out by that and leave. But if we're way too aggressive and overbearing and like some sort of a bear, that freaks them out too, so we can't be too excited about this. Too much excitement will freak them out. So let me just give you an example. Let's say you're in class when you were younger, or at work now, and someone starts making fun of you. They just are roasting you right there in the middle of class. Everyone's cracking up. Now your options are you can start crying and just break down right there. Soon as you do this, you know everyone's going to tear in on you. You get nicknames you never wanted, and that sticks for a long time. You're sissy, crybaby, all that stuff. Let's say you just take it. You just quietly sit there and they just roast you and roast you. And you start just you take hit after hit after hit. Where does that leave you? You just keep getting roasted. They don't stop. People don't chill out because you took it. They give you more because you're gonna keep taking it. Anyone who's ever had a bully knows that one. Or if you've ever been a bully, you know that one. You don't stop because they take the hits. You just keep hitting, right? What happens if you posture up and say, hey, back it off, or I'll back you off? You get angry. What'd you say? You see somebody who starts getting pissed off or angry. And later, people either respect you more or they know not to mess with you. Either way, it seems like anger will get you a better result than sadness or vulnerability. Now, we learn as far as respect goes that people who are afraid of you are going to be more respectful to you than people who don't think you're going to do shit or think you're a crybaby or you're soft. Now, I wish that wasn't the truth, but it just really is. A lot of times we even get pissed off when we see extreme weaknesses because we're taught and judged that that's not good. So as us guys being taught anger is acceptable, whenever we have an emotional moment, we are taught by experience that it is completely acceptable as long as we're anger time bombs. At any moment we can get triggered and blow up at somebody, and that'll usually be like, now they learn, don't mess with me. Problem is that has a cost. Because if our currency is based on our value that we bring to the table, which circles us back to, what do we provide as men? Do we provide safety, security, financial stability, love, kindness, compassion? What do we bring to the table? And women start measuring us by our value that we can provide for them, so that way we're the ones that they choose. Now, because our value is in what we provide, it gives us a difficult time with our coping mechanisms because we're not allowed to show our authentic feelings because that contradicts what people have rewarded us for. Now, you remember, awareness is completely unbiased, but needs are universal. Write that down. Now, we have our needs and values that we have inside of us that coincides with what we want. We may have a need for respect or a need to be heard. It might be a need for honesty. Could be a need for acceptance. Could be a need for love. But just because we have a human moment and we have an outburst of anger doesn't mean that we're clear on what our needs are from the person that we're interacting with. Whether it's a partner, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a boss, whether it's a friend. Just because we have a moment, a real human moment where you get angry because that's what we're taught to do, doesn't mean that what you were trying to say to them was very clear. Classic example right here for you. If a wife tells a husband he spends way too much time at work, and he says, I acknowledge that you think I work too much. She says, well, spend less time at work. He comes home the next day and he says, I signed up for a golf tournament. Now I'll have a lot less time at work. And she gets pissed. What are you doing signing up for a golf tournament? I wanted you to be home at 7 so you could have dinner with me and the kids and we could have quality time. But that's not what she said. She said, spend less time at work. And so he said, I'm spending less time at work. I'll be golfing then. I won't be at work so much. And this is an expression of not being clear with what your needs were, even though you felt like you were being clear by saying, you're working too much, don't work so much. But you didn't say what you really wanted. Now, the same thing goes for us. In order to be more clear of our needs and what we need from somebody, we have to also be clear on what are our values. So, to figure out our values, you know what we're going to do. That's right, awareness. Awareness is our number one tool that we have to do to figure out what's our core values. Now, when it comes to identifying our values, what is at the core of what it is? Here's an easy trick to figure it out. What is one of the things that happens that pisses you off? Because usually if you take something that happens that makes you mad, you can break it down to the thing that is important to you. It could be respect, loyalty, honesty, strength. It could be any of these things that become important to you. And it helps you identify what are my core values for me. Now, being able to understand that foundational values now makes it so you can articulate what some of the needs that you have are. Could be a need to be heard, which is part of respect. Could be a need for truth and trust, which is your honesty. And being able to break down these needs makes it so you can be more clear when you're in a conversation to figure out what your needs are. Now, once we're able to try and figure out some of our needs, we also have to be able to practice getting good at identifying another person's needs while we're in the middle of it. So, you already know me. We are going to have some practice tools. I don't believe in just giving you the information and not having anything to practice. Now, since this is a very tip of the iceberg video for figuring out your values, your unmet needs, and understanding where does your reactions come from, such as we're taught anger, we're taught to be closed off, we're taught to suppress our feelings, time to tap into what they really are or where they come from. Now, the first piece that we need is to be very clear on our request for your needs. This is where we have to remember the difference between a request and demand. This is where we need to remember the difference between a request and a demand. And the way you can remember the difference between a request and a demand from somebody is simply the way they react when it doesn't go the way they wanted. So you ever had somebody say, hey, can you get me that thing over there? And they feel like they made a request and you're like, oh, I can't do that right now. I have something else to do. And then they get pissed off. Like, I told you to do that thing. Why didn't you do it? They weren't making a request. That was actually them making a demand. If anybody gets upset about you not doing the thing that they asked, they're not making requests of you. They're making demands. And that's the number one way you can figure out whether it's simply asking if they can be indifferent if it isn't done, or they're demanding because they'll be pissed off if you don't do what I asked. You're not really asking. You're telling at that point. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to get into using tools for observation, which is awareness, the feelings, catching what it is that I feel or they feel in the moment right now. What are the unmet needs? What do you need that you're trying to get to? And then figuring out a request. Now, like Rosenberg said at the beginning of this video, remember that you're both always trying to fulfill an unmet need.
Every criticism, judgment, diagnosis, and outburst of anger is a tragic expression of an unmet need.
If you're arguing with somebody, they're trying to fulfill their needs, and you're trying to fulfill your needs. But if neither of you has any awareness of what the other person's needs are, you're going to keep butting heads, have animosity, resentment, or just get fucking pissed. So the entire practice for this is being able to identify what's my needs that I'm not getting met here, and what is their need that's not getting met here. So we're going to use these tools of observation, feeling, needs, and requests. First, practice on yourself. Look back at some moments that you've had, any argument that sticks out to you, whether it be with a spouse or ex-girlfriend, loved one, family member, boss, friend, any argument you can think of. And then break down yourself. What was the observation you had? Well, I observed no judgment. I observed they were upset because this thing happened and this thing happened. What feelings did you have? Well, I felt angry and I felt disrespected and I felt sad that all of that happened. But what did you need? I needed them to listen to me. I needed to be heard. I needed to be able to connect so we could work through. And I needed them to do the thing too. So then what would the request be? Now here's an important thing about requests. There's 3 parts to a request to make it possible. And a lot of times if you look back at some of your requests that were really demands, you'll find your request may have been missing some of these things. The first one, and an important one, is the request doable? Is it possible for this person to even do the request? I need you to do this thing for me. And they're like, I don't know how to do that. They're like, well, now I'm pissed because you're not doing what I wanted you to do. Is the request doable? The next part is, does it have a time frame to it? How soon do you want this to start going? In which case, this is where the agreement comes in. We don't make a demand that somebody do something that they don't agree to because it'll never get done. I think our stubborn asses know what we mean by that one. If somebody tells you to do some shit you don't want to do, odds are you're not going to do it. Right? So have a time frame on this. Make it so you can go like, all right, I need this by Friday. Can we get this done, please? Yes, I agree, Friday. That would work. And then make sure you're using the action language that goes along with this. And this is usually where the agreements comes in. Like, I agree, I'll have this done. I'll do it today. I'll do this thing. I'll have this part. I do agree with this, and make sure you're working together on like, yeah, I can do that, or yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I could do that, or do we agree? Now, I know doing stuff like this is so weird at first, but I promise you, if you're with somebody you care about and you break out a sheet of paper and you write down observations, feelings, needs, and requests, and instead of getting into why you're right or getting defensive, which remember, if you get defensive, the conversation's over. If you get them too defensive, the conversation's over.
All right, so here's the tools we're going to be using this week when we're discovering unmet needs. So what we're going to do is go through the observations, which is being able to see just what is it that's going on. This is going to be the identification or the awareness part. Next, you ask about what are the feelings? What do you feel right now? Sad, angry, upset. And I'm going to give you a list of feelings and stuff to help out with that because we're usually not that good at it. Then, what do you need? This is the part we get tripped up on because it's hard to identify what are our needs and then making an honest and open request. What is it that you would want to make an agreement on that we can work on together? So this way we can find some sort of resolution to move forward without being so damn angry or upset or hurt. So here's a bunch of needs and values, and this gets into the core of what it is that our needs or our values are, and this will help you out with understanding both for yourself. So grab the words that do mean the most to you and use those when you're like, I'm stuck. And then feelings, again, as dudes, we have to push down so many of this. The only one that seems to make sense will be like sadness or anger. But there's a bunch involved, and maybe some of these can help make it a little bit easier to identify what are your unmet needs.